Today's word is awareness. Last week was alignment. Today is awareness concerning the watchman. When the watchman took his position, he needed to be aware and he needed to be alert. His eyes were very important, and so was his hearing. He needed to be aware of his surroundings, and he needed to be in a position of alertness, because his position was so keen. It was his responsibility to alert the city of oncoming danger. And so it is with our nation, and so it is with our cities. Who are the watchmen? Who are the watchmen of our city? Who are the watchmen of the nation of America? Who is it? Is this a special calling as the prophets? Or possibly, as there was this position in the Old Testament, has there been a transitional move maybe in the times that we're living in now that that mantle should be upon the church of Jesus Christ? So as the church goes, so does a nation. Not as the nation goes, the church goes. We're facing cultural challenges, but the church of Jesus Christ should be affecting its culture and not the culture affecting the church. And so who is impacting the world? Who is bringing the message of transformation? The Apostle Paul in Romans 12 says, "Be not conformed, but be ye transformed." In America today, as we're facing challenges, there is a spirit that is arrogant. It is behind abortion and other issues. It cries out, "It's my choice, don't tell me what to do." It is very clever. It manipulates debate. It positions itself behind seats of power. It is the power of deception that we find in the music industries and other industries. 1787, Edward Gibbon wrote a book called The Decline and the Fall of the Roman Empire. And for 20 years, he studied the Roman Empire, trying to find out how a nation or an empire can be so great and suddenly collapse. How could that happen? Possibly, as I give these 5 things, you would consider America this morning. His 5 reasons for the fall of such a great dynasty is this. Number 1, he said there was a rapid increase of divorce with the undermining of the sanctity of the home, which was the very basis of its society. I don't need to tell you this morning the deterioration of the home in America. For what makes a strong nation is a strong spiritual church that involves a watchman, which makes strong churches, strong family unit. Why a church is so weak is because the family unit is weak, which in turn makes a weak nation. Number 2, he says there were higher and higher taxes, the spending of money for bread and celebration. I don't need to mention any more on that. Number 3, he says there was a mad craze for pleasure. Sports becoming every year more exciting, more brutal, he says. We just saw this past week interview with LeBron James and ESPN Sports. I don't need to talk about that anymore. Where we regard sports and entertainment in America. Number 4, he says it was the building of great armaments when the real enemy was within. And it brought the decadence of the people. And number 5, he says that there was a decay of religion. Faith finding more mere form, losing touch with life, and becoming impotent to guide it. Listen to what Proverbs 14:34 says. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Psalms 33:12 says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Galatians 6:7 says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatsoever one sow, he shall also want. The decadence that we face in our nation this morning. When we look at the destructions of Britain, the Puritan watchmen were warning the age of destruction because of rampant sin and ungodliness and the decadence. It was Thomas Hall who wrote, the sins of England I fear more than all the enemies of the world. It is not Spain or Italy, France or Turkey that I fear. It is atheism, blasphemy, apostasy, and profanity of all that is holy and contempt of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I wonder who our greatest enemies are. Maybe we're trying to build an armament to keep them out, and maybe they're already within. May God humble us There was an article by James Dobson focused on the families quite a number of years ago that I was intrigued by. It was written in the Washington Post. And this individual wrote an article about Christians who were calling the Capitol to protest Clinton's lifting of the homosexual ban. And they referred to the Christian community as poor, uneducated, and easy to command. Isn't that wonderful? Now, stay with me for a moment. What other group in our nation could they have insulted in this way? Can you imagine the outcry that would have gone up if a major newspaper referred to maybe Hispanic Americans or Chinese Americans or African Americans or Native Americans as poor, uneducated, and easy to command? Hello? There are those that say, oh, that's just the way the world is. We don't need to get involved. We're moving towards an end. And I'm just waiting for Jesus to take me out, and then this will all be over. I call that escapism. So we allow it. And I wonder, is there anything worth putting our reputation on the line for or in jeopardy? I wonder what the silence is all about. See, this spirit seeks to silence the church. And we become uproar when these things when we see these things and we say, how dare we? Would you object if your children are routinely indoctrinated in the homosexuality ideas in the public school system? Would you object if imperfect babies are killed in hospitals? Would you object if involuntary euthanasia becomes widespread in nursing homes? Would you object if every teenager in America is given immoral advice and a supply of condoms to implement it? Would you object that each family is permitted only one baby per family? Do you object? At the turn of the century, James Burns wrote a book, Revival. And he said the laws and the leaders of revival. In the opening chapter, he discusses laws of revival as well as laws of the absence of revival. And he says the first tendency is for the doctrine of the church to lose its power of convincing the conscience, convincing the mind, or moving the heart. He goes to point out that spiritual decay brings with it formality of worship in which the ritual is so exalted that it crushes the very spirit of God. You say, Pastor, we know all those things. I know we do. But sometimes I think we've been so inoculated by these things that we are in the state of sedation where we hear it and it doesn't affect us anymore. And I pray this morning that as a people of God, we become aware and we become alert. It's not that we're not aware, but maybe we're just not alert. What is God looking for? He tells us such in chapter 22, verse 30. We must be men and women, young people who will stand for Him in truth and righteousness. God is looking for somebody who would say, I want to make a difference. Somebody that says, I believe in the midst of all the decadence and the darkness, I believe that your light can outshine the darkness. And that the salt that you have given us, we can be that salt in a world that is losing its flavor and becoming distasteful. We must be men and women who will not only fill the gap, but we will also make up a hedge. Why is it that we stand in such an hour? Because standing involves courage. Because standing in the gap is not popular. Because there are certain battles that you fight when you begin to take a stand for Jesus Christ. Because standing in the gap will require me to be bold. Because standing in the gap will require me to be ready to fight. Because standing in the gap means I have to stand gap in my home, in my workplace, in the school, and wherever I find myself in this society. And let me tell you something this morning, church. If we will not take a stand for God, we're sure to face a destruction as the people of God in this society in America. And it says that God found none. You know why God found none? Because if we're going to stand in the gap, there are certain requirements that are required of us by God. The reason that He found none was because no one was convicted enough to take the challenge of building up a wall. No one was compassionate enough to take the ultimate sacrifice of standing in the gap. No one was courage enough to face the arrow and the bow and the enemy and that which he throws against us. Because nobody was consecrated enough to surrender everything and knowing that God is in control of all things. So when I begin to hear these things, I'm encouraged because you know why? That lets me know, number one, is that there's something about the name of Jesus Christ. It's no other name but the name of Jesus Christ is going to bring opposition. Why? Because that's the name above all names. And one day every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And every knee is going to have to bow and confess that He is Lord. You okay mentioning Buddha or any other name, but when you mention Jesus Christ, something is stirred up and all of a sudden there is a rise of opposition. And also when these kind of things happen, it lets me know that the enemy is scared of the God that we serve, and that when we begin to move forward, all of a sudden the devil and his demons will rise up in opposition because they know where true authority is. They know who is victorious. They know who resurrected from the dead and holds the keys of hell and death.